Hi, I'm Darlene Carman. Welcome to the show. Laura Monczynski is a certified master gardener, a master composter, and green gardener. She specializes in organic edibles, soil, and compost. Laura teaches classes all over the county in both home and professional gardeners. Today, she will talk about the advantages of growing plants in containers and show us some tips and changes and techniques to get favorable results. Hi, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Darlene.
You've been a certified master gardener for since 2001.
Right.
What did you have to go through the process to get certified?
Well, the program, it's through the University of California. So you get interviewed, you apply to the program, you get interviewed, and then if you're accepted into the program, it's a 16-week training program. And the idea is to give University of California research-based information to the home gardener. So it's mostly UC professors and people like that who are teaching these classes. And then there's an exam at the end. And then in exchange, you give back a certain number of volunteer hours to the community. And also every year we have to keep up our certification by taking continuing education courses to stay current and volunteering a certain number of hours. So the first year for me was 100 hours volunteer time, and then 25 after that.
And these classes, they're hands-on. I imagine a lot of it's hands-on.
To a certain extent, depending on how big the class is, but some things there may be a hands-on element. And there's a different topic every week, like it will be entomology one week and irrigation another and pruning trees another week, so that we learn all of these things that the public might ask us about.
Yeah, and I bet they do. So what are the services that the Master Gardener program provides to the public?
Well, one of them is our helpline. So the Master Gardener program was set up, the one in Santa Clara County started in 1982. And it was set up as a go-between to get research-based scientific information to the home gardener. And people couldn't just call up a UC scientist and find out the information.
Right.
So they trained us, and then we pass it along. So what we do is we have a helpline where people can call with their gardening questions or email us a picture of a sick plant or that sort of thing, or bring it in, and we answer their questions. And everybody, after they go through the program, works that help desk a certain amount of time.
So you do, I wasn't sure that you had a location. You do have a location people can come to?
Yes.
And is there anything that they can view, like any secret gardens or anything?
Well, we do have, another thing we do is we have research and demonstration gardens all throughout the county, because we have different microclimates throughout the county. So with those gardens, what we do is we plant things to see what grows best in our particular climate and our particular soil, because it's not the same throughout California and even throughout the county. So that's why we have them throughout the county. So see what does best in this area, under what conditions, that sort of thing. And sometimes we'll invite the public to come see the gardens, or we'll do classes right in the gardens.
And all that's on your website. I remember seeing one, there was a big event where you were selling tomatoes and all kinds of goodies. That was, I think, in April or something.
Yeah, so that's our annual spring garden market, and that actually funds the program for the whole year. So
for the whole year?
Pretty much. So we plant in our, we have greenhouses and shade houses, and in addition to the gardens and the ground. So, but in those greenhouses, starting in January or February, we start planting mostly chilies and tomatoes. So we'll have about 100 different varieties of each. So people get to experience different varieties. And we focus on things that are hard to find in a store, to keep the genetic diversity, keep all these different varieties alive. And then we sell those at our spring garden market. And that's what we use to pay for our laptops that we take out and teach classes at libraries, that sort of thing.
What about in the fall? Is there any other programs that go on, events that the public can, is that later?
Yeah, we do have a fall garden market now too. The spring one's always been our big one. We've been doing that for about 24 years or something like that. So that's our big fundraiser, but we do it in the fall. And we have classes year round. We teach them in libraries, community centers, adult education programs, and right out in the garden too.
And do you know when it is in the fall, when the event is?
I don't know the exact date,
I
I'm
mean,
afraid.
October?
Usually September.
September.
Usually September
Okay.
would be the right time to plant things
Well,
for
I
the
always
fall.
knew about the April one, but I didn't know about the fall one.
Yeah, we've started that more recently.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite aspect of gardening? Everything.
I think I love to start things from seed.
Oh.
And when I first see something germinate, it's like creating life. That's very exciting for me.
Oh, so that's your favorite thing. And any particular plant that you like, or
I really
plants?
like edibles.
Me too.
I love working in my garden, but if I'm going to do all that work, I want to be able to eat it. So I really like the edibles, and that way I know what I'm eating. And so I have in my own garden, I have about 20 fruit trees. I have a 400 square foot vegetable garden. And then I have things tucked in containers wherever I can find a little extra space.
Well, speaking of containers, what would be some of the advantages to growing plants in containers?
Well, in this area, space is probably the biggest one. A lot of people live in apartments, condos, or even if they have their own yard, they tend to be pretty small. So one advantage is space.
Okay.
And you can plant in containers anywhere. We have a master gardener who plants in containers on the diving board of her swimming pool. I mean, you can always find a little extra space if you want. Also, sometimes finding sun. A lot of things do well with sun. So if you have a container, you can move it around to where the sun is. Maybe the only place you get sun is on your patio that's hardscapes, and the place that you have ground is in the shade, so you can put something in containers on your patio, that sort of thing, and take advantage of the
And move
of the
them
sun.
around along with the sun, kind of.
You can put them on wheels. You don't necessarily have to pick it up.
And then, you know, with people being so mobile and living in apartments and things like that, I find a lot of people just do not have gardens.
Right.
It's just not available. You see them up on their patio, up in their little, whatever you call that, the trellis or whatever. You see plants up there, but they just don't have the garden space.
Right.
So-
So in that case, you put a container on your patio or even on your kitchen counter.
Yeah. And then personally, I find digging to be a little bit not as much fun as just having the convenience of having pots and just doing it that way. I really like container gardening. I think it's much easier.
Right. Yeah, you have a small space. You don't have to dig, as you mentioned, and also you don't have to bend down as far necessarily.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you can do a variety. Some things that you might grow in containers need very specific soils. And you don't want to amend your whole yard necessarily with a certain thing. But there are plants that do well in containers because they have very specific soil needs.
Well, what would those plants be that actually do better in containers than if they were planted in the ground?
Well, some things based on soil needs would be carrots, for instance.
Carrots.
So because carrots need kind of a loose soil.
Okay.
And I always learned you grow them in sand, but we actually did a research project through Master Gardeners where we grew carrots in 3 different soil types, 14 different varieties, and then did a tasting. So we had 42 iterations of carrots to see what did well. And we found that the best soil blend that gave the best taste was 1/3 native soil, just what's in your garden, 1/3 compost, and 1/3 perlite. So you're not going to amend your whole ground with something like that. So if you do it in containers, so I use those old recycling containers, the rectangular ones, and I grow my carrots in there, and I only have to amend that amount. Another one is blueberries. Our soil tends to be alkaline. Blueberries tend to need a more acidic soil. So it needs to be amended maybe with sulfur or something like that. It's hard to do in a big piece of land. Do it in a container.
Well, getting back to the carrots, I've always been curious about carrots. How do you know, I know it's a stupid question probably, how do you know when they're finished? Because everything's under the surface.
It is. Sometimes you have like a little bit of a shoulder that's above the ground.
So you
and
look
you can
for
look
that?
at that. And you know, you just move your finger around a little bit to see. But when you see that kind of getting big, you know kind of what the size of a carrot that's ripe would be. So when it starts to get that size, just kind of dig around one of them with your finger gently in, so you're not breaking up too much if it's not ready.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. I think I grew some sunchokes. Somebody gave me some sunchokes, and I planted them, and never knew what to do except just dig in there and see if there was any sunchokes, because there wasn't anything growing on the top to let you know.
Right.
So carrots, you have the green stuff, you know.
Right.
But sunchokes, there wasn't anything.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you just have to kind of
just go down see what's happening right above the surface, that little shoulder, and if it looks like it might be big enough, just dig it down a little bit. Don't dig it out, but just with your finger move a little soil
life
aside.
in there.
Yeah, because there are things like that are underground.
Potatoes would be something. Is that something you can grow in pots?
Yes, you need a bigger thing.
A bigger thing.
I've seen people grow potatoes in old garbage cans, for instance, because it can go down. Not a used one. I say old because they're the kind that we used to use that we don't anymore, because all the cities have their own ones that you wheel out. But I imagine you could still buy a brand new.
But that's very deep.
It is, but they do grow deep.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And when you first plant them, you kind of mound them up a little bit as they're starting to grow.
Oh. I didn't know that. So they have a lot of root system that you don't really see. I mean, I get mine at the store, you know.
Yeah, they'll go down quite a bit. They'll go down quite a ways. Yeah. So the more room you give them, kind of the more you'll go down. But those you get a little bit of a hint, because the tops will die back, start to die back when they're ready. So you have a little bit of a clue. But again, sometimes you just have to dig a little bit very carefully, like an archaeological dig, so you don't do too much damage if they're not ready.
I have a ton of houseplants, but nothing edible. So what could I try indoors that might be successful?
Herbs.
Or might not? Herbs.
Herbs. Especially in the kitchen, they're right there. Sometimes you'd cut just a little bit, that sort of thing. That would be my first choice for edible. You could do some lettuce or something small on the kitchen counter, but...
Well, herbs, you don't have to worry about this year-round seasonal thing, right? Because I guess you have to really pay attention to what's in season. At least that's according to the shopping centers, you know, the gardening centers. They only show you what's in season.
Right.
But you were talking about seeds. So what would be good for indoors if you wanted to grow vegetables? Would the salads be something that you would grow by seeds, or?
Yes, you can start them from seed, absolutely. Lettuce and various greens, bok choy, that sort of thing. You can start all that from
really
seed.
Good.
Now, I start from seed most of my vegetables. A lot of my vegetables I'll start indoors from seed in January or February. Things like tomatoes or chilies that need a long growing season. If I wait till the soil is warm enough for them to germinate, they're not going to be maturing till the end of the summer. So if I start them indoors earlier, and I have grow lights and a special table and that sort of thing indoors.
So if you don't have that type of thing, then you're in trouble, unless you have sunny windows?
Sunny windows are okay. They won't let as much in, and what happens, they'll be great for some ornamental plant that you have in there, but if you're starting tomatoes or something like that, they'll kind of get leggy trying to get to the light, that sort of thing. I just use regular fluorescent shop lights for my lights, so you don't have to go out and buy expensive garden lights. And what I do is I buy half cool and half warm, and I alternate them so I get the full spectrum without paying for the special grow lights. But you can do that. It's just a matter of what space you have, what time you have, what's interesting to you. I had my garden on a tour once, and so I had the seed starting station indoors, and I brought that in and I showed the person, said, you know, this is my seed starting station. And she said, yeah, Laura, sometimes some people call this a family room. So it just depends on your priorities.
I can relate to that. Well, are there any special requirements, special needs that plants in containers have that plants maybe in the ground do not have?
Definitely. So they definitely need a light soil, like a potting soil. We have an example down in front of a light potting soil, because most of us in this area, we have these kind of, you know, hard clay soil.
Yes.
And so if you put this in a container, especially if it dries out, it's kind of like cement. So you want something that says it's a potting soil so that it's a looser soil and it doesn't get dried out and hard like that. Also, some of the things that you might do a little bit differently with plants in containers is you have to water them more regularly because the roots are in a very limited space. So they can't go looking for more of what they need. What's in there is all there is. And same thing with fertilizer. You have to fertilize more regularly because what's in that pot is it, and when it runs out, that's it. So you just have to make sure to stay on top of those. Plants that are in the ground can put the roots out really far and find water and nutrients and that sort of thing. So with a container, not necessarily.
The fertilizer, is that a special type of fertilizer that you use for container gardening, or is it just an all-purpose? I have one, I won't say the brand, but I have one that I use for everything. And it's it's not strong.
Right.
Yeah, it's not very strong.
And you don't want it very strong. I mean, you might do half strength if you're doing a container, that sort of thing. But the type of fertilizer really depends more on what it is you're growing. It doesn't matter if it's in a container or if it's in the ground, it's what you're growing. For instance, on fertilizer bags or boxes, the label, there are always 3 numbers.
Yes.
And those are NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. And so those are the 3 main nutrients that a plant needs. So it will have the percentage of that nutrient in each one of those things. So for instance, it might say 573 or something like that. And so the nitrogen is for green growth primarily. So if you're growing something that's just green, like grass or spinach, you need more nitrogen. Whereas the phosphorus is for flowers and fruit and also roots. So if you're growing roses, you want a higher middle number. And then the last one is overall growth. But you can get a balanced fertilizer that's 555 or 10-10-10 that has all the numbers. And that's kind of, that'll be okay for everything.
Takes care of everything.
Yeah, it will. But if you really want a lot of fruit or a lot of flowers, you might want to target your fertilizer to what you're growing. But it doesn't really matter if it's in a container. You just, like you said, you don't want to be very strong.
Now, speaking of containers, you brought some containers along.
Yes, so I want to talk about the different sizes, shapes, colors, materials, that sort of thing, because that can make a difference in what you're choosing. For example, plastic is easy to find, it's cheap, it's lightweight. It has its disadvantages, but so some of the things here, like these are kind of basically the same size. I tend to like things that are narrower and deeper because there's more room for the roots to go down. So if I had the choice between these two, I'm most likely going to choose this, unless I know it's something very shallow. Also, color can make a difference, especially if it's outside, because something dark is going to absorb more sun. It could burn the roots, it will dry the soil out more, it will need more water, that sort of thing. So sometimes if that's what you have, you can paint it, you can put cloth around it. Sometimes if you put a pot inside one that's slightly larger, you have an air cushion there that will help with it not heating up too much.
Would you believe we have like 10 minutes left?
Okay, just let me show you one other thing with the pots. So ceramic or terracotta, this is more porous, so water kind of comes through there. It doesn't hold water as much, whereas this, it's only losing water from the top, not the side. So those are all things to consider: size, shape, material, color, when choosing containers.
And people can have a lot of fun with making it personal by painting them. I have a lot of gifts that they just use clay pots and paint decorations on them. They're really, really cute.
And you can use anything. It doesn't even have to be a pot. I think the easiest one, and I've seen people do this, is they buy a bag of potting soil, cut an X in it, and put the plant right in there. It's a container, it's easy.
It's kind of fun.
So you can use anything that you can stick a plant in, but you must have drainage holes. That's a really important thing to learn. So whatever it is, drill holes in the bottom.
This orchid is pretty. You're like,
Yeah,
what
so
do you want to say about the orchid?
Well, this is an example of specific soil types, because orchids are epiphytes, And so they grow naturally on tree bark, so they grow better in bark than soil, that sort of thing. One really important thing in any kind of gardening, I think the key to success is knowing where something came from originally. And knowing it's the soil, the climate. No, the soil, the climate, the conditions that it evolved in, and you know it will do well in that kind of condition. So as close as you can get to its original conditions. But this is another example, too, of people like to put things together in pots sometimes. And that can be very pretty, but it's very hard to exactly match soil, water, nutrient requirements and have it work long term. So this is something that somebody gave me, and those flowers will fade, but when they do, there's a lucky bamboo in there, so you've got something permanent that stays.
I probably would say, you know, I think we ought to see what she brought to pot.
Okay.
See, let's do that.
Okay.
Excited about that.
So I'm going to stand here.
Sure.
It's a little easier to do that.
Sure.
So you had talked about mixing things in containers. And mixing things can be challenging, especially a lot of vegetables need a lot of root space. And you don't want them competing because you want to get something to eat. But one thing that can work is lettuce. And you can put different types. So you have an assortment, so then you've got a salad right there. And so you just go and clip various things.
Okay.
One thing I love to do with containers is match the theme to what I'm planting.
Okay.
So I thought lettuce in a colander might be good.
This is going to be your planting thing.
Yeah, so this is what I'm planting in. So I'm just using a colander, so it's a pot, but it kind of goes with the theme of what I'm doing.
I like that.
I cut some burlap that somebody gave me so that it doesn't drain too quickly. And
that's cute.
Yeah.
I would have never thought of that. You could give it to the Goodwill, or you could keep it and plant in it.
Yeah, why not? It's fun to be creative. In fact, I went to Goodwill the other day for some ideas, which I can talk to you about. So what I do with the potting soil is I usually water it ahead of time, maybe an hour ahead of time, maybe sometimes even overnight. Right.
We did.
Because it can get hydrophobic, and it's really hard for it to, it takes a while for it to absorb the water.
It turns like powder. Yeah, many times.
Yeah, and then the water just kind of doesn't absorb it. Yeah.
So for this quantity, it looked like you had about a cup and a half of water, maybe, something like that.
Well, okay, so a good soil is half solid and half pore space for air and water. And of that, you want half of it to be water. So if you have something that's maybe a gallon, that would translate to a quart of water. So a quarter of it would be water.
Okay.
So that way also, if I want to water in as soon as I put it in there, and if I water too much, things can float away, or if I've put fertilizer in there. So lots of times I'll blend a little bit of fertilizer in first, or I'll put some in there and then put a little bit of layer through with soil in between. So what you're doing when you take the plants out is you never want to pull it by the stem, because that's where the vascular tissue is, and you'll choke it out.
Right away.
So, you know, you can hold on to the leaves, or if you can just hold the pot like that. Again, you notice my fingers are around there. So I'm just kind of putting a variety to make it pretty and a little bit unique.
Now, I noticed that you're not wiggling underneath the roots, so they'll be fine.
Yeah, these were just dug up recently, so they don't have, that's a really good point. They don't have a lot of root on there, but sometimes it'll be a little, oh yeah, I won't drink out of that water now. So sometimes they'll get a little root bound in there, so you want to kind of tease the roots out so that they're kind of going outwards, especially something that's a little bit woodier. You don't want it to start circling and doing that. So I would do something like this, and then I would fill it in with soil.
Now this salad keeps going, right? I
mean, so this is like a leaf lettuce. So what you do is you cut the outer leaves, and more will come up the middle. So I wouldn't necessarily do this with a head lettuce where you get it all at once.
Yes.
But with leaf lettuce, and so you can just put a couple different things. What I would normally do, if I could have found romaine that was ready at the time, I might have put that in the middle, so you've got something dramatic in the middle, and then smaller things around the side. There's kind of, in container gardening, this design concept called thrillers, spillers, and fillers, where you have something dramatic in the middle, something kind of hanging over the side, and then you fill something in. So that's just kind of a design concept.
Now you
people
have a
do.
class that you are teaching in the fall. Tell us
Yes.
about the Green Gardener class.
So the Green Gardener program, this is through SCVRP, Santa Clara Valley Urban Runoff Pollution Prevention Project.
Well, let me write that down.
And so this is to teach the professional gardeners, we can sit back down if you like,
Okay.
to be more environmentally friendly. So it teaches them to do things like not overwater so you don't have runoff that takes pesticides, contaminates, that sort of thing. How to plant the right plant in the right place so you're not always fighting against something that's not good in this climate or that sort of thing. And if a plant is stressed, you're more likely to have disease problems, and then people are more likely to want to use chemicals on it, that sort
Yes.
of thing. So these are maintenance, mow and blow type guys. They're designers. They're people who own their own business. And it's a 10-week program, and then they're certified as a green gardener. And a lot of people are looking for gardeners who will do things in a more environmentally friendly way, that won't just go in and blow away the organic matter or spray every time they see one bug, that sort of thing.
The right way to get rid of the little creepy crawler things. That
Well, we do what we call integrated pest management, or IPM, which is where we approach it different ways, understand the life cycle of the pest so we know when to do what, know what it is, knowing your plants so you know what things kind of go with plants, and different ways. There are mechanical controls you can use. Some things you can go out with a flashlight and pick them off. A lot of different ways you can do it, that you don't have to just go for the chemicals right away.
Now, the class that you're teaching, do you ever teach that to regular gardeners, home gardeners?
Well,
Do you
this
have a version for them?
this particular class, yes, home gardeners are welcome to that.
They're welcome.
And some people will do that.
And will that be on the website, the general?
So to our
the
Master
one that's
Gardener
listed, I
website.
hope that that's being posted.
So to our Master Gardener website, yes, there is a link to the
for that.
Green Gardener program. So that will start in September. And
September.
that's a 10-week course.
Okay.
And then also on our website are all our other classes through Master Gardeners that are throughout the county all year long.
Oh. Well, there's so much to learn. We could spend easily a half an hour just on the little creepy crawly things. And I have a lot of questions I would love to ask. But actually, these questions, people can go to the website.
Right. So
I encourage people to do that. Thank you for watching the show, and please watch again, and go to the website and pick up the phone to call and ask those questions. I know that they would just love, especially Laura. No, you'd love her too. Thanks for watching this show, and watch again. And what kind of lettuce is this guy? What is this one?